Values are all over the place. From the familiar to the most esoteric, our ways of thinking, talking, and acting seem imbued with value through and through. This basic concept lurks in the background of ordinary discussion, politics, and religion, framing often clashing worldviews. But is this concept transparent, or does it present hidden complexities? The only way to find out is to move it front stage, put it under a microscope to understand its inner workings, and separate it from proximate, confusing notions. Where to start? Every journey starts from where you are, and our common ways of talking constitutes the data set that any theorizing has to fit. Ordinary language confronts us with two radically distinct ways of characterizing reality. We have factual judgments and value judgments. Examples of the former are: the tree is 200 years old, the earth is roughly spherical. Examples of the latter are: Mary is such a kind person, helping others is a noble thing to do. It should be apparent that factual and value judgments are not in any sense incompatible. In normal life, it is hard to find instances of one type unaccompanied by the other. Some concepts, like that of kindness, seem to encode both dimensions. It describes how people act, react, and interact, but it also adds a layer of evaluative approval, basically saying that it is good. What does then justify the distinction if in our thought and experience these aspects are so inextricably tied? Exactly that evaluative aspect just mentioned for kindness. The good. Perhaps this word bears too specific a connotation to be of use in this abstract analysis of what value is. The good and the bad ring the bell of morality that is just one subdomain of the value world. Moral values can be compared and contrasted with aesthetic values. We judge things, sounds, people, and whatnot as beautiful, and that appears to be a different kind of good. To remedy the unwanted connotations hence, I will use the words positive and negative. The answer to my question of what justifies the fact-value gap is simple. Value judgments ascribe to reality these generalized properties of being positive or being negative. Factual ones do not, they just report the facts. Moreover, all that is needed to ground our value judgments are those two special properties, the positive value and the negative value. Just two values, no more. To make sense of this idea, one needs to separate two often confused meanings of the word value. We must not mix up what is valued from the value itself. An analogy might help. Nobody would confuse a color from what is colored. The color orange is not the fruit orange. Analogically, it might be common to say that, for example, friendship is a value, but literally speaking, this cannot be, as value is merely a characteristic of friendship like the color, orange is merely a non-evaluative characteristic of the fruit. In the simplest terms, we mean that having friends is good. It needs emphasis that the negative value is not just lack of the positive value. From an evaluative standpoint, we can judge many things as neutral, neither positive nor negative. Being neither is a whole sky distant from being bad. Towards something we consider bad, we feel and act in completely different ways than towards things we judge as neutral. Once these distinctions are in place, it should be obvious what is meant by saying that there are only two values, the positive value and the negative value. An indefinite number of things could have positive or negative value, but values themselves are only those two characteristics. A further analogy can elucidate and reinforce the point. Take existence and non-existence. Many kinds of things exist, but are there different kinds of existence? It doesn't make much sense to say so. Trees and stones are different kinds of things that exist, but there's no difference in existence itself. They are different, they are out there and real. They simply exist. There is no special tree existence differing from a special stone existence. As we have seen, and as we are about to further discover, ordinary language is rather indiscriminate when it comes to value talk. In a theoretical setting, if we want to see things clearly, we must not lump together such disparate phenomena. To this lump it belongs the means-ends pair. We normally talk of objects, tools, events and situations as good, only meaning that they are good for something else. Being good for is a completely different notion than that of being good full stop. The nomenclature mapping the distinction just drawn is that of instrumental value and intrinsic value. Which concrete example belongs to which category might seem not that clear. One thing should be uncontroversial: both divide in positive and negative. Things can be good or bad instrumentally, as they can be good or bad intrinsically. An ancient example of something having intrinsic positive value is happiness. One is supposed to value happiness for itself. It is not a mean to some further end. We could consider friendship having intrinsic positive value, or try to instrumentalize it. Friendship is a mean to surprise happiness, perhaps. In fact, instrumental and intrinsic are such far apart notions that they can coexist in the same space. Friendship can be instrumentally good and intrinsically as well without logical contradiction. What sets instrumental value and intrinsic value apart? Instrumental values are straightforwardly practical and contextual. Intrinsic values seem a lot less, even though not completely severed from actions and practical concerns. But then, where and how do values exactly enter the picture of human action and concerns? Exactly at that psychological juncture where people understand and relatedly explain their behavior to one another. What is evoked here is not a scientific theory of the human decision-making process, but rather a folk psychological framework that has served us well in dealing with one another since we verbalized our dealing with one another. It is an extremely simple and basic model that comprises two mental states that bring about actions. In lack of better words, we can use the familiar ones, belief and desire. Actually, one of the names for this model is belief-desire psychology, also known as folk psychology. In this context, belief is a type of information-bearing cognitive state. One believes something when on whatever subject you hold it to be the case that things are in some way. For example, believing that you have a full carton of eggs in the fridge. What a person holds to be true partly determines behavior, but it is certainly not enough to cause it. Enter desire. The other main ingredient in the recipe is desire in a quite minimal sense. It is neither burning desire, nor it has to be directed to some special kind of things. It is simply a mental state that prompts you to action. Parallel to our formulation of belief, it is wanting it to be the case that things are in some way. For example, wanting to eat an omelette. These two mental states are the key to understanding and explaining human behavior in the simplest terms. It should come as no surprise that someone who thinks not to have eggs at home but wants an omelette to go out and buy some. It should sound like a truism. This action is understood because it is explainable by reference to that desire and belief. This applies all across the board. An action that we cannot trace back to pertinent beliefs and desires is unintelligible and irrational. It doesn't make sense. If you know to have 30 eggs at home and want to make a 3-egg omelette, it would be completely baffling why would anyone go buy some more, unless we could find some ulterior combination of beliefs and desires that rationalizes it. Values fit comfortably in this picture of the human decision-making process. First off, instrumental values are clearly at play in wanting to buy eggs. Eggs are good for omelettes. One of the subject's beliefs concern this instrumental value. The whole behavioral process can be broken down into a chain of actions underlined by a corresponding belief that that particular action has instrumental value in the obtainment of the final goal. Opening the door has no intrinsic value, it is a mean of getting out. Walking to the store has no intrinsic value, it is the mean to get to the eggs. The whole sequence in this way is made sense of. But where does intrinsic value find place in this banal story? I would like to submit to you an idea, certainly not original, but not always justly appreciated or clearly stated. Intrinsic value is the ultimate explanatory posit of behavior. Russell once joked that, at least for medical reasons, explanations have to end somewhere. What I just claimed is that for explaining behavior, the chain of instrumental successions has to end at reference to intrinsic value. One can always ask why after every because, and in practical matters there will be a last because equivalent to either one of the following. I want it to be the case because it has intrinsic positive value, or I want it not to be the case because it has intrinsic negative value. After that, it does not make any sense whatsoever to reiterate the questioning. You can of course ask related questions like, why do you believe that it has such value, but not why do you want it? After all this clarificatory work behind us, let's judge common but sloppy value talk that is to be found all over the place. Values are said to be principles, people are said to have different values, and one of my favorites, value is created. Sometimes this is innocuous, but to sloppy talking corresponds murky thinking, and out of the former, and the latter, we should not expect to flow good course of actions. Principles are propositions that one holds to be true that guide behavior. If values are principles, when we say of something that it has value, it logically follows that a proposition is held to be true that guides behavior. Sound plausible? Concrete example. If we say of a piece of art that it has value, it follows that it holds a proposition to be true that guides behavior. But wait a moment. A painting has no mental states and cannot behave. Hence, values are not principles. Of course, this was a parodistic deduction. This is just sloppy talk. The held principles talk about values. They are not values, as your name is not you. It is a piece of language denoting you. People having or lacking or having different values commits the same original sin, confusing our means of representation with the reality represented. Having value is exemplifying it, not being the one who represents it as exemplified. It is a perfectly fine distinction that there is no reason to blurry with sloppy talk. This is considered a lofty and deep view. In a material world intrinsically devoid of value, you can somehow give it to it. This creative process is nothing short of magic, but not in a good sense. The mind is supposed to project like a light onto the world, manufacturing an objective property and dressing with it beings outside of itself. The mechanism of value creation, do not make any mistakes about it, is completely left in the dark. The mental state of value creation is a mystery to behold in awe and by without quality check. This mental state cannot be anything similar to belief. Belief is no creator. Belief is true if it corresponds to how things already are out there, false otherwise. Believing it won't make it real, being real makes the belief true. If the value is not there, your thoughts about it will not make it valuable. They will just be false.